Have you ever thought about what it would be like to witness a crime taking place? What details would you pay attention to? How much would you be able to recall when you were giving a statement to an officer later? Would you feel confident in picking out a suspect from a lineup? Do you think you would trust your memory enough to be a witness in a court case? Throughout this presentation, we will explore a few aspects of memory that may leave you questioning your own reliability.
So I found a case from, what are they, Jiang and Ron, and from 2017, and they found that, well, they used a test uh, of like brain scans, and so they used brain scans so that, and they test their subjects when they were under like stress, and so Jiang and Ron, I don't know how you exactly say that name, but they found that stress disrupts behavior and working memory. So whenever you're like under stress, you'll have like your behavior will change, and then also your working memory will change, which means that or you won't have as much capacity in your working memory. And your working memory is like where your um, like where your experience is at. And so you won't be able to do a lot of things. You have less capacity in your working memory. You'll have you'll be less accurate, and it'll be difficult to retrieve memories. And so there's just there's a difference between your long-term memory and your short-term memory, or your working memory, which is, your long-term memory stores like information and like your experiences, and whenever you need to access your memory, your long-term memory, it'll be your working memory will pull it from the long-term memory. Whenever you're under stress, that doesn't work as well. And so, what does this mean for court cases? Well, this means that, whenever you're up there and you're, you know, at trial, that and you're being asked to, recall something, you're not going to be able to do so nearly as accurately. And those trials are pretty, they're pretty like, I don't want to say like strenuous, but they're long. They ask a lot of questions. They ask you to evaluate and manipulate memories. If they're evaluating a car accident, they'll ask you whether the glass, they might ask you whether the glass was broken, or what color the car was, and those aren't particularly things that you might have remembered, or that you were focusing on. And so high stress can alter, if you're, trying to access memories, you may just have to make up something. And so, it can be pretty easy to get that wrong whenever you're under a lot of stress. Um, so basically, how stress affects memory, well, your memory isn't as good whenever you're under stress, and how that affects court cases is that there are a lot of testimonials that are false because they're high stress situations.
Hello, my name is Mariah Pantoja, and in the slides before, it was talked about how stress can affect the way we recall memories, or how the memory is formed under stress. In this next section, I'll be talking about how questions can lead a person to remember events that have or had not happened. This is a way that memory can be affected. And when it comes to crime scenes and witnesses, police must be careful when interviewing them. I'll also be talking about the research that I have done that goes along with what I will be talking about. An interesting fact about police and crime investigations is that police must gather information as quickly as possible before memories of witnesses begin to change and alter. There are two significant ways that questions can be formed. The first way is how a question can lead a witness to recall information that is altered depending on how the questioning is done by the investigator. These leading questions can lead a witness to believe that they saw was true, but not what they actually saw. Types of questions that are leading and can alter what is remembered are questions like, did you see the man in the green and blue plaid shirt? Instead, the question should have been asked like, did you see a man in the green and blue plaid shirt? The second way of questioning is the better way to ask a witness because it is not misleading. More examples of questions that are encouraging for an investigator to ask are, how can you be sure that is what you remember seeing or hearing? Or, and then what happened? These types of questions help the witness's memory in recalling and reporting what they've seen or heard. The Enhanced Cognitive Interview, or ECI, is the most reliable interview and is known to have enhanced witnesses' memory. Before it became enhanced, it was called cognitive interview. The reason for the change is because it was noticed that the interview style was not helping witnesses draw on the correct memories. So it was redone, and it is now known as the ECI, or the Enhanced Cognitive Interview. This interview is actually used by investigators everywhere in the United States because it has the correct forming of questions and can help a witness recall memories in the most correct way. And also, this interview style does not have any questions that will lead the witness to believe otherwise or lead them astray in their memories.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Platt, and for this portion of our presentation, I will share some of the information that was discovered by a study conducted by Camp, Weststein, and Bruin about how the questions that eyewitnesses are asked can impact what a person can remember. This study was conducted in 2012 and how they sought to investigate the process of retrieval-induced forgetting of eyewitness information. As was mentioned in the introduction, the article wanted to investigate the relationship between questions and forgetting. They wanted to examine and recreate the type of retrieval practice situations that closely mimic the process of eyewitness questioning, and also to document how a person can recall information based on what they have seen. By examining the effect of retrieval practice on forgetting, the investigators wanted to use questions that could be asked by police officers during interrogations for real-life applicability. They would be asking questions about the supposed criminal's hair, clothes, and build. Imagine what an officer could ask that would help the ability of a person to share all of the relevant information needed to help solve a case. As a way to understand how this study was performed and evaluated, I will briefly share the way that the experiment was created. Participants were used from the university in Rotterdam, and they were all fluent in Dutch. They were asked to watch a crime video that mimics a real-life scenario, and then after the viewing commenced, the experiment group would be given time to answer a set of questions. There were 2 sets of questions created and 2 offenders in the video. They would be asked to remember 5 different characteristics about each offender. There were questions that were considered practice questions, ones that the participants would see multiple times, and other questions that would only be asked at the final investigation. What is interesting to note is that when there are eyewitness accounts of crimes, the witnesses are usually approached multiple times with various questions from law enforcement, which would then either lead up to a court date or other conviction of the criminals. This study confirmed that retrieval practice in the form of questioning can induce forgetting of eyewitness information. that asking questions about a particular offender's characteristic, such as their haircut, can induce forgetting for that same offender, such as their clothes. But that can also include the forgetting of the same characteristic of a different offender, their haircut. The forgetting effect was not limited to information about the offender that was used in questioning, and also occurred for information about the other offender that was similar to the practice information. This study is also the first to find forgetting of offender characteristics outside of the category that received retrieval practice.
Have you ever heard someone use the phrase, all Asians look the same? Or maybe it's all Hispanics look the same, or even all Americans look the same. What is it that makes it so easy to tell apart people from our own race, but maybe it's a little more difficult for us to tell apart people from other races? The idea that people remember faces from their own race better than faces from a different race is known as the other race effect. Generally speaking, infants are more frequently exposed to faces from their same race. The repeated exposure teaches the developing brain that this is something important, increasing attentiveness to same-race facial features. Because of this, the brain inadvertently learns to process other race faces more superficially. Rather than taking the time to encode features deeply, the brain tends to skim over them as you might do with a long page of text. Because of this skimming, it may be more difficult to recall whether you have seen a person of another race previously or not. The image on this slide shows a depiction of the experiment that Brown and Associates performed to try and test the other race effect. They had male participants of either African American or European American descent and showed them images of either African American or European American males for 2 seconds, and then followed it with a slide that was blank for 8 seconds. They showed them a series of 200 faces, and then 24 hours later asked them to return, and they showed them the same 200 faces, but had also interspersed 200 new faces into the series. And as the participants looked at the images, they were to decide if the face they were seeing was a new face or whether it was a face they had seen the day before. Through this experiment, Brown and Associates found a statistically significant difference in the number of correct responses they received for faces of the same race versus faces of other races. They attribute the lack of memory for other race faces to a reduced engagement of the cognitive control network. And basically, the brain, when it is encoding facial features, is not as attentive. It's paying less attention to the facial features of people of other races. So looking at the study's results, what are the implications when we apply this information to our theme of a crime scene investigation? There are many court cases that hinge on the testimonies of eyewitnesses. If these findings are accurate, what does this mean for the reliability of an eyewitness testimony if the suspect is a member of another race? How reliable is the memory of an individual in picking out a suspect from a lineup? So just to recap, through this presentation we've discussed how stress can inhibit our working memory and can interfere with accurate recall of events that we have witnessed. The wording used in questioning can affect our memory for events and can influence our responses to questions. Questioning may also induce forgetting certain details and alter other memories through retrieval. And superficial encoding for other race faces may inhibit the ability to remember whether we've seen an individual or not previously. Thanks so much for watching our presentation.